Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Finelli. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and everywhere you get your podcasts on demand. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, and come and join us in the chat, a.k.a. the Cover 3 Tailgate, where they are fired up for a couple things. Among them, we have college football this weekend. We did it. The rest of the calendar year on Saturdays, every Saturday from now until we flip the calendar to 2025, we're going to have college football. We're going to be previewing it and breaking it down here on the Cover 3 podcast. We're fired up for that. They're also fired up because we are wrapping up win totals this week. The first half of the Big Ten alphabetically here on Monday. Then we will do the rest of the Big Ten on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, our very best bets. We've been telling you all these different teams or where a game and a half, over or under the win total. Well, now we got to put our name to it. We've got to go out there and hand you the season-long winners. So our very best bets for all the win totals, and that will include some teams that we have not covered. So, you're looking for, that sicko MAC under 3.5. Well, you got to come to Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time so that you can come and find out where we are looking even outside of the power conferences. Before we jump into a very special win total here at the beginning of the show. Now, one of the things that we actually got a chance to break down on our CBS Sports Network show on Thursday afternoon, by the way, we'll be back on Tuesday this week, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Come watch us on the mothership, was the commitment of five-star offensive tackle David Sanders. So, Bud, I think this is one of the first times we've really gotten to dig into it here on the podcast side of things here with our friends at the Tailgate on YouTube. David Sanders commits to Tennessee. You were kind of, your words, you were diamond hands on it. Kind of felt like Tennessee was going to be able to hold off all the big dogs. What did you make as we learn more, in the wake of him actually making his commitment official?
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy, 6'6". He'll be 300 by the time he enrolls. I mean, like, I've seen footage of him in practice, like literally playing receiver. He is that level of athlete, really special guy. I mean, top 3, top 5 player for us at 24/7 Sports. It was cool to see him, commit on the network. Definitely needs some more polishing as an offensive tackle, but the reason why you put all those resources into it is because, you want to capture that upside in your program, because David Sanders is the type of guy who, barring like a head coach getting fired, just never hits the portal if he actually develops and hits in your program. Like if he goes to Tennessee and hits, they're just never going to let him go. They're just going to give him whatever he wants, right? Because you just don't find these guys walking the streets. God don't make many dudes who look like this and move like that. And it's a huge get for Tennessee. I mean, they're moving up, man. Like when they hired Josh Heupel, one of the questions out of Orlando, like, how well would he recruit? And I think NIL and Tennessee's NIL organization and embracing NIL with Aspire has come along really at the right time for this fall's program. I'm excited to see where they're going.
I mean, yeah, it's a big get for Tennessee. I think that obviously he's a good player to put on the tackle, and left tackles are hard to come by when you can find a good one, so you always want to get them. I also think the other side of this story is, and it's something I plan on writing about today because this is a Big Ten win total show. It's another loss for Ohio State in offensive line recruiting. And they have, we have talked a lot about, like last year, their offensive line was a concern. There's some concerns about the offensive line going into this season. And if you look at the recruiting class, like they're ranked near the top, but if you go through at the offensive line, it's not exactly stacked with 4- and 5-star studs that give you confidence in their line going forward. So there are two sides to it. It's great for Tennessee and it's bad for Ohio State.
Very, very fair. All right, before we get to the Big Ten win totals, we want to give you all the latest that we're getting from across the country. That's when we give you the players that are making a buzz. Camp buzz. Camp buzz. Camp buzz. Talking about players that are buzzing. All right, first, Tom, you were working the CBS Sports news desk over the weekend, which means that you were actually the very first person in the world to know about Colin Lacey. So, I just want to say congratulations for being able to break that news. No, Bad news for Louisville's offense. You're going to be already turning over a lot from last year's team that made it to the ACC championship game. As you started to look at the cards and what they're losing in Colin Lacey and sort of who is going to have to step up in that absence, what really stands out about how this injury is going to impact Jeff Brom's squad?
I mean, obviously they're replacing Jamari Thrash, who led the team in receiving last year, and Lacey comes in from South Alabama, and he's expected to be, if not the number one guy, at least one of the top targets in that offense. So if you lose him for 6 to 8 weeks, which is the estimation with the broken collarbone, it's a big loss for that offense. But for me, like, there are other guys. They have Chris Bell, who finished second on the team in receiving last year. They brought in Ja'Cory Brooks, the former Alabama receiver, who's also another transfer that they added. It's just, when you look at those two, Bell and Brooks, they're kind of, outside receivers. It's like, I think Colin Lacey's role was going to be in the slot, which I think if you go through the history of Jeff Brom offenses, slot receiver typically plays a pretty big role. I think of the Rondale Moores of the world. So it's going to be interesting to see how they go about replacing that and how it impacts their offense. Because this is a team that, if things go correctly, like they reached the ACC title game last year. I don't know if they have that in the bag again this year, and I think the Lacey injury certainly complicates that. But I do think this is a big blow to them before the season starts, because this is a team that can compete for an ACC championship game. It's a team that could be in the running for an at-large berth for the college football playoff if things go correctly. And not having him, things aren't going correctly.
Agree with that. I do think that there is some chance that he was maybe the third best receiver on this team if everybody stays healthy and things go right. But he is clearly one of the more proven receivers on this team and had a lot of production, for South Alabama. I will say early in the season, there are a couple tough games for them, right? Georgia Tech gave them hell for about 20 minutes last year. At Notre Dame is one that I think you would want to have Colin Lacey on the field for. Home against SMU, kind of the same. They should be fine at Virginia, but maybe Virginia's salty. Like, do you get him back for when Miami comes to town on October 19th?
Collarbone is so tough.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, he might be back for that Miami game, but he hasn't played all year. You know what I mean? It's like there's going to be
like
the rust
weeks.
factor. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. I think if you told Louisville, hey, you can get him back by Miami, I think they'd probably take that. Right.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a newsworthy one for me. A couple others here. I do want to point out that Notre Dame, KVA, stud linebacker, top 50 guy they signed last year. Looks like I think we kind of put the hit stamp on him. Like, he is a hit for them in recruiting, and Irish Illustrated obviously doing a great job on following all of that coverage. But he's going to play. Like, I don't think he's going to start, but he's going to be in their linebacker rotation. And I think that's saying something, because Notre Dame has a really good defense. So the fact that he's going to get snaps on a defense of that caliber really says something. Staying in the linebacker world, did you guys catch this one I had it in my notes here, for Nebraska? Javin Wright out indefinitely with some kind of health condition, looks like.
Oh, that's a bummer.
That's not
good. He's kind of important. Nebraska's camp could have gone better than it has in terms of injuries and whatnot. They already lost their left tackle. Now one of their starting linebackers is out. I'm a little side-eyed on Nebraska and the love, as we'll see today.
Ooh. We're going to talk enough Nebraska as it is. How about Mad Dog Maddox Madsen? He went and did it. He went and did it. The shuffling of papers that you might have heard from your home in my office was me making sure that I had like 30 days on the receipt to return all the Boise State things that I had purchased, because I've been over many platforms boasting about Boise State's ceiling. And it's not that it was hinging on Malachi Nelson, as I think I'd explained here, but yeah, Boise State has named Maddox Madsen as the starting quarterback for the season opener against Georgia Southern. Bud Elliott gave you a hint here that we might be trending that way based on some of the camp buzz that we had. Now that the news is official, Tom, how are you adjusting your expectations for the Broncos?
Not overly significant. Like, here's the thing with Malachi Nelson. I know he was a former 5-star quarterback, but the fact that he could not earn the starting job at USC over Miller Moss, and he had transferred to Boise State, had caused me to kind of adjust my anticipation of what he's worth to begin with when it comes to like a power rating standpoint. And then that he was going to Boise State and he was in a battle for the job. Like, I still think Boise State's probably your favorite to win the Mountain West. Now, does it possibly impact their playoff hopes? Sure, but I've always felt like Liberty was the best bet to get to the playoff out of the G5 anyway, simply because they're probably going to be undefeated. So it doesn't have a tremendous impact for me as far as what I think of the Broncos, because they still have Ashton Jeanty. So
Right.
That's where they're going to be leaning. That's where they're going to be giving the ball to. And, we saw the kid play last year. He took the job from Taylon Green. So it's not like we haven't seen him play. It's not like he doesn't have experience. My bigger thing is, how did Malachi, how did they whiff on him so bad? Like, as far as recruit.
I'm curious as well.
You want me to bring it up, bud? I think I can.
Yeah, like this is the guy he lost the job to, guys.
If you're watching on youtube.com/cover3, I don't know if that's going to impact me, bud, the way that you thought. I mean, obviously you've got a better eye for talent, height, weight, size, speed, muscle mass, and all those things. I can't stop looking at that gorgeous head of blonde hair and just, the kind of cheeks that you just.
Uh-oh. We lost
Did we lose Chip?
Yeah, I think we did.
Chip can't even get through this bit with a straight face without freezing.
Come on, you telling me that doesn't look like a kid you could see running down the ramp at a Royal Rumble one day?
If you told me that he was the captain of Pie Cap for the flag football, I'm like, all right. If you told me that he is the starting quarterback for Boise State and that they are odds on to win the league, I don't know if he should be odds on. Like, you got to lay money to take Boise to win the league. I am skeptical.
Boise's going undefeated. That dude, he's gonna throw a touchdown. He's gonna crack open 2 beers, stone cold style, right there on the field and chug them.
He has either become the reason why the Mountain West race is wide open, or a superstar of Mountain West football and Group of Five in general. Like, it's either going to go one way or the other for Mad Dog Maddox Madsen. So
I would actually like you to finish your thought that we lost you on. The kind of cheeks you do what with?
You want to pinch?
Ah, okay. Because that was a weird time to lose you. You're like, the kind of cheeks you.
Well, listen, I've told y'all, screen share will destroy me. We like, I don't know what it is, but we tried to do what did we try to do one time? Fill out the entire NCAA tournament bracket as if it was college football teams. That was a disaster.
Maybe if I have screen share privileges,
okay,
it won't. Because I know I've done it when I've hosted like a show. So.
But we'll just starts accidentally posting screenshots of the spreadsheets.
Yeah. they list him at 6 foot 175. I think this is kind of like a Fafita 6 foot.
Bud goes to show us a tweet, and then we see the third string of South Alabama's depth chart instead.
No. Then we see.
You want a South Alabama depth chart update?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
All right, so check this out. They got this running back named Fluff Bothwell. And apparently he is killing it for them. So
Fluff
Bothwell. Look at that.
Fluff Bothwell.
Fluff is a terrible name for a running back.
That sounds like somebody should be winning on the web.com tour,
It's the kind of, it does. It's the kind of cheeks you want to pinch, cute cheeks. It's clean shaven.
I bet Fluff's got cute cheeks.
He's from Aniana, Alabama. Okay. 5'10", 219. We're all in on Fluff Bothwell.
So that's an ironic nickname.
Yeah. Fluff Bothwell sounds rocked up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, judging by his photo, he does not skip neck day.
Yeah. Love that. All right. Before we hit a break and jump into the Big Ten win totals, we laid the challenge in front of the university. We have yet to hear a response. We told them, we said, if you join a conference, we'll do your win totals in one of the conference win totals. However, even though University of Notre Dame has not responded, we are going to take the high road here. We are going to be the bigger men in this situation, and we are going to give you the Notre Dame win total for 2024.
as much as I think it's the under is a safe play, like I can't even.
Count 'em up. Count 'em up. How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I can't fathom 8 wins.
How many games y'all gonna win this fall?
I just can't. I don't see it. It's not on there.
It's
not the schedule I'm looking at. Unless there's another schedule somewhere.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish have a win total at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, of 10.5. The over is plus 142. The under is minus 176. Many of the reasons why you've heard people talk about the expectations for Notre Dame during this season has to do with the schedule. A schedule which, to let some people tell it, only has 3 games. There are actually 12 games on there. So the question, Tom, is do you see Notre Dame winning 11 or 12 of the games on their 2024 regular season schedule?
First of all, I just wanted on the record that I voted against Notre Dame being part of the Big Ten conference. Notre Dame's had 1,000 chances to join the Big Ten. So the fact that we're just throwing them on the Big Ten show, and then the added insult of Illinois is first alphabetically in the Big Ten. We're going in alphabetical order, and you have the audacity to bring up Notre Dame before we get to the Illini. No. You got the kind of cheeks I just want to slap right now, Chip, to be honest with you. I mean, 10.5? Like what? Under. This is like a 9-3 team. They've already lost their starting left tackle for the year. They were replacing both tackles. Offensively, I still have a lot of question marks about where this team's going to be. I think defensively, they're going to be fine. They're going to be one of the better defenses in the country in all likelihood. It's just I have very serious concerns about their ability to score points against the better teams that they're going to face on the schedule. Now, there are a lot of teams on the schedule that they should beat rather handily. So I don't see them finishing below 9-3, like 8-4 if they suffer a whole lot more injuries, maybe. But they're not winning 11 games under 10.5.
I mean, just to read through how this went down, I said we should slip Notre Dame in today, and Danny, we still need your email for the fantasy league. I said, all right, all invites have been sent because we're drafting tonight. And then I said, do you want to do Notre Dame? I think today is the day to fit it in. Tom says, do we not have a show scheduled for Independence? And Chip and I are like, no, bro. The calendar, although I'm guilty of that too a lot of times. And then, we basically said, all right, let's do it. So, and then Tom got angry because I said that like today's teams in the Big Ten have a lot less juice than Wednesdays. So.
Yeah, just the defending national champions and the current national champion Illinois Fighting Illini.
That's all we're talking.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm.
I'm under here, not like by a massive amount, but FanDuel is still hanging that hook out there, and this is actually, I believe, the best price in the market to go under if you want to get that 10.5, which I do. I do think that the offensive tackle injuries will have very little effect in most games, but in the toughest games that the Irish play, Texas A&M, Florida State, and Louisville, they will play teams that have quite a few guys who will hear their names called very high in the NFL draft when it comes to pass rushing. And I think that could be a problem. I like this defense a lot. I kind of like the Price and Love combo at running back. I think they got some nice tight ends. I think this is the best receiver room they have had in many years. And I like Riley Leonard. But 10.5 is a pretty high bar to clear. And even though they have probably 7 gimmies on the schedule, the remaining 5 games are still, you go 3-2 in them and lose this bet if you go over. So I'm going to go ahead and take the under.
I'd be bigger on Notre Dame if they had a guy named Fluff Bothwell. By the way, I just tweeted that name. I just want to see what kind of reaction it gets. Nothing else, just the name.
So what's the 4th toughest game on this schedule? No, 4th would be Louisville. What is the 5th toughest game on this schedule?
You think the USC game is tougher than the Louisville game?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I disagree, but all right.
You're a hater.
Yeah,
I think would we agree at Texas A&M is number 1 or home against Florida State?
At Texas A&M.
Probably at A&M because
of the matchup.
Yeah, I agree. They are. It's a very high floor schedule with the build of this team. I mean, even if Leonard goes down, I think you have max confidence that the backups can lead you to 8 wins. Like they're not going to go 6-6, but I mean, at Georgia Tech is
I would say
they won't be 2 touchdowns at Georgia Tech as things stand now.
Yeah, it's either at Tech or at Purdue. And neither of those, I think it plays to the point that you're trying to make here, are games where you look at where you're terrified.
Yeah. So it is like 8-4 is the bottom fallout type scenario.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're going to be like 3 touchdowns plus to Virginia, to Army, to Navy, to Stanford, to Miami, Ohio. They could be 3 touchdowns to Purdue if Purdue's not any better.
I'm not ruling out Chuck Martin going into South Bend and surprising some people.
I mean, what was it? They lost to Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. That was kind of, I mean, wasn't that the first year?
Yeah. First year Freeman.
I'm saying you don't just let Chuck Martin walk into your house and think you're not going to have a tough day.
The defense is so good. So, by the way, I'm on the under as well. The defense is so good that they are going to like have these games that, I can't even take your line, Tom. I mean, do you want to talk about how it's like, there's lots of, there's like a black and gold and then there's like a blue and gold, like I just think we could have Iowa vibes with this Notre Dame team.
They are. Yeah, they're blue and gold Iowa. There's a chance they could be that this year.
There's a chance that they could be some blue and gold Iowa and just be so good defensively that all these games are low scoring and you really do just need one play. And look, Notre Dame's offense, even with all of the injuries or question marks across the board, to me is much better personnel than Iowa has had in any of these recent years.
God, yeah.
But the way that they are the overwhelming favorite in all of these games, fans are just going to be pulling their hair out because the deficit's not going to be big enough. But it's just you rely on the defense, and the defense will win you the game. And the defense is probably going to win you 9 games. I just don't think the defense is going to win you 11 games. I guess elsewhere in the market, this is just a round 10 at more of a split price.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I might take even under 10 if I was given that opportunity.
I kind of think the 10.5 matters. Like I would pay a premium for the 10.5 just based on how my distributions are done here.
Okay.
I would pay more than 70 cents, which is typically how you price it. Like I'd pay like 85.
Because
Iowa with a TV network, by the way, that was
the joke. Iowa with a TV network. All right. So we're all clean sweep of unders here.
Yeah. Danny's on the under too. Danny said they're going 4-8.
Danny did say they were going 4-8, just like 2016. He said it's just like 2016.
Do they make the playoff at 10-2?
Yes.
I would imagine so.
I think so. Yeah. I have them as much more likely than not to make it 10-2, but I don't have it as 100%.
Are you running like the full playoff simulation with that? Where you're like also running everybody else's schedule and just sort of just seeing what they all look like at the same time?
Yeah.
I think because 10-2 means you've got one win against Texas A&M, Florida State, or USC.
It does matter who they beat, I think, for sure.
Right.
And how, like, is USC a good win?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, name value, certainly, but like how good is USC? We don't know. Like that's the last game of the season. They may or may not get any credit for that.
But beating Florida State could be the win that you need to be able to get into the playoff.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Coming up on the other side, our win total season rolls on with a look at the Big Ten, starting with the first team alphabetically in the Big Ten, the Illinois Fighting Illini. We'll get into that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Win totals rolling on as we look at the Big Ten. And we begin with the Illinois Fighting Illini at FanDuel Sportsbook. You can get this at 5.5. Pretty fair split here. Plus 104 to the over, minus 128 to the under. First word from Tom Fornelli. What are we doing? Is Brett Bielema leading this team to a bowl game in 2024?
Oh, now we want to talk about the Illini. I mean, looking at this schedule, find me a loss. I don't see one. Like, they're going to win at Penn State. They're going to beat Michigan. They're going to win at Oregon, and they'll be like 4 touchdown favorites against everybody else they're playing. I'm going over. I am going over in reality, but It's going to be a tricky situation because I think you look at the non-con, you get Eastern Illinois at home to open. They're like 30-point favorites in that, so I'm pretty confident. Central Michigan at home should be a win. Kansas is the kind of game where you're really going to have a good idea of what Illinois is, and I honestly think, like, if you want to take the Illinois over, I might just bet the Kansas. I'd bet the Kansas game because if they lose that game, they're probably not going to go over because it's going to be tough. Because when you get into conference play, you're starting with consecutive road games against Nebraska at Penn State, which is a tough thing to go ask of. You get the bye, you come home, you get Purdue at home, which you should win, but Illinois has struggled with Purdue for God only knows reasons the last few years. Then you get Michigan at home, and then the very next week you're going to Oregon, and then the end of the schedule is where the wins should come. You get Minnesota at home, a bye, Michigan State at home, at Rutgers, Northwestern at Wrigley. When I look at the team and how it's breaking down, I think that one of the reasons I like the over is when I look at the Big Ten as a total this season, I don't see a ton of great offenses. And I think Illinois has a decent chance to not be like a high-scoring offense, but to be a very efficient offense. And I think they're going to lean more on the run game because they're really high on their offensive line and they're really high on their running backs. And while they like the receivers and they like Luke Altmaier, I think that the concern is on the other side of the ball. Like last year, the defense was a big problem for the Illini, but the concern was in the secondary. They expect the secondary to be better this season. The defensive line is where I kind of get some vibes that they're a little iffy. Obviously, losing Johnny Newton's a big problem for him, but on the interior, I wonder if other teams are going to be able to run the ball against them pretty well. So I think you're going to see this team take kind of a more of the complementary approach that you're accustomed to seeing from Brett Bielema in the past, where they are going to run the ball and try to control the clock to help their defense. And I think they will be able to run the ball pretty effectively. So when it comes to the games against teams that are in their tier, I like them. I do not think they have enough to beat Penn State or to beat Oregon or to beat Michigan. But those other games, I think they're going to be live. They're going to be live in every single one of those games. So I do think a bowl game is in the cards. I'm going to go over.
Can you expound upon them liking the receivers? Because I'm like nodding my head. That's new. Like they like the receivers.
Yeah, they got Sakari Franklin in, who you probably remember from UTSA. He went to Ole Miss last year, did not play much. He got hurt, but he's reuniting with Barry Lunney, who was the offensive coordinator at UTSA while he was there. Pat Bryant is a senior who they're pretty high on. So I think you're going to see a lot of those two, especially when they're in 12 personnel, which they will be in a lot. Then there's some other younger guys that they're pretty, they need to see him playing in games and to be, proven commodities, but they like Malik Elzier sophomore. They like Colin Dixon, a redshirt freshman. These are tall, long, and quick options that they feel like could be beneficial for them, particularly in the red zone. So the concern is they brought in this kid, Cole Rusk, as a transfer to play tight end because they really didn't have a pass catching tight end. He's out for the year. So they have good tight ends, but they're better run blockers than they are pass catchers, or at least more proven to this point. So that is going to be another situation. So it's like when I look at the offense, they like Franklin, they like Bryant, they're high on the rest of the guys behind them, but they don't have proven commodities. So I do feel like based on what they have personnel-wise, you're going to see them lean into the run game more.
I'm over as well. This is a weird one where I have them winning 7 games, like very, very few times, but I have them winning 6 a decent bit. So it's sort of a strange distribution there. And I think it really speaks to what Tom's saying. Like the quality of quarterback play that they play in the Big Ten is potentially atrocious. So can they out run game bully ball people? I think so. They got to get through that early schedule, as you mentioned. I think I like getting Nebraska early rather than late because Nebraska may get their act together later on in the season as Dylan has a little more experience under him. Kansas early is tough. Like Kansas worked him last year.
Yeah.
Maybe they got something for them. Maybe they don't. I think you'd rather get Kansas late because obviously, Daniels with the back has not shown the ability to stay healthy over the course of the full season. But to me, Minnesota at home is certainly winnable. I think Michigan State at home is very winnable. At Rutgers is not a game that they cannot win. At Northwestern is kind of a neutral site, to be honest, with the setup here. If Illinois is having a season in which they come into that game with 5 wins, I got to think some Illinois fans will travel to that neutral site, basically. And Central Michigan and Eastern should both be wins. And I'm not incredibly high on Purdue, so I am over here.
I'm under slightly. It's a hard schedule.
Mute him. Hold on.
It's a hard schedule.
It's a hard schedule.
It's a hard schedule. You gotta play a lot of good teams. I see an Oregon, I see a Michigan, I see a Penn State. You know, those games against the teams that I'm a little bit excited to see if they take a step forward. Your Rutgers or Nebraska, those games are on the road, which means I give Illinois less of a chance to be able to come out on top. The Kansas game, as you mentioned, is massive. I kind of think Kansas wins that game the way that I'm looking at the Jayhawks right now. Here's what I do like. I like that this run, and let's throw Northwestern in there, bud, because your point's very, very strong. Purdue, Minnesota, Michigan State, Northwestern. 3 games at home, 1 game on a practice field. You know, like
one's at Wrigley Field.
Oh, is the Northwestern Wrigley?
Yeah.
Well, sure. Then there we go. Purdue, Minnesota, Michigan State, Northwestern at Wrigley. Like those are the games that will decide your season. The fact that you were getting them at home or at the home of the Cubs, I think that's a good break. So slightly on the under here, but I definitely see, based on the schedule draw, it's a really hard schedule. Based on the draw on a really hard schedule, I could see how it ends up breaking, especially with the location of some of those toss-up games.
It's a harder schedule for the teams that have to play Illinois, Chip.
Listen, the people have been talking about how when Oregon is looking at its Big Ten slate, it's like, whoa, you got to play Illinois.
That's right.
Who do we got next?
Indiana.
Can I go first? Because I've got to run downstairs and grab the ants. The ants we ordered died. Remember how it's too hot for the ant farm? They just got dropped off. I just saw it on the ring cam. It takes me like 2 minutes when Tom's talking about Indiana. Let me go first on Indiana because I don't want them to die because the way our friend Oregon's it's going to sit there and bake and be really hot.
Save the ants.
Save the ants. All right, go Indiana.
I am over on Indiana. I basically the way I priced this was, what if you took a badass Sun Belt team and dropped it into the Big Ten West? Because that's essentially what Indiana's schedule is, and that's essentially what their roster is. Okay, you get Curtis Rourke, who's healthy. They did lose one of their really good left guards, so that's a problem. But ultimately, like, how good would plussed up JMU have done with this schedule?
Mm-hmm.
And I think pretty well. Like, I think Indiana's a better team than Purdue. I think I don't know that it's like a bottom 3 team in the Big Ten. And that's not saying it's great. I just have negative opinions on some of these other teams. Cignetti is a pretty decent proven coach. I think Tino Sinceri actually has done a really good job at quarterbacks if you look at his track record. So I'm kind of bullish on Indiana being able to make a bowl game here. And I'll be right back with some ants.
Save the ants. Save the ants.
I hope those ants die, but I am also on the over for Indiana here. I'm not betting it, but I mean, it's mostly schedule related, like the FIU, Western Illinois, Charlotte. Those are 3 non-conference games all at home that the Hoosiers should win. At UCLA is your first Big Ten game. UCLA, we'll get to that tomorrow, but UCLA could be the worst team in the league this year. So to me, that's not what I'm not giving Indiana that win, but that's a winnable game. Maryland at home, Northwestern on the lakefront. God knows what that game's going to look like. You get Nebraska will be tough. Washington, Michigan, and Ohio State, they're all there. But kind of like I was talking about with Illinois, every other game you look at on the schedule, I think Indiana can win. My concern is, or at least where I think things could go wrong, like this whole team is a bunch of transfers.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So especially early in the season, when you've got a lot of winnable games, maybe the unfamiliarity kind of sneaks up and bites you in the ass at some point and costs you a game. But I think as the year goes on, this team will get better because they'll be more familiar with one another, and that's when the schedule gets tougher. But I really like Curtis Rourke as a quarterback. I've been high on him for a few years as a big Ohio booster myself. And there's a lot of good players that he brought in from James Madison with him, so there is familiarity there. So I do think this team is good enough to where the floor will not be like there's no rock bottom in this team. Like they're going to be competitive most weeks at a minimum.
I'm kind of right on this. If forced to make a call like we are right here, I'll lean to the over because of coaching. I just think that Kurt Cignetti is a really, 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 really good coach. And like you mentioned, when you bring over, Elijah Surratt's awesome. There are players from James Madison, and then on the defensive side where he brought over almost the entire staff, like there are players from James Madison that you remember being great during this, run last year and the way that they've been able to hit the ground running at the FBS level. such that, yeah, I could see this all working out. But man, they play some of the big question mark teams for me. Like I think Tom just mentioned we have our UCLA range of outcomes is massive. Could be the worst team in the Big Ten. Could be a pretty competitive team that's going to be a tough out, especially when you got to go play them on the road. I think Jonathan Smith is a good coach. I think Aiden Childs is a good quarterback. Michigan State's lost a ton. The difference between in Michigan State being the dead last team and Michigan State being like, what, 12th, 13th, somewhere around there. That could be the difference in whether Indiana goes over or under. Washington could be anything. And so with all these mystery teams on the schedule, I find it a little tough to go with super confidence. My Chipolytics gave it right at 5.5, 3 wins, 4 losses, 5 toss-ups. And so I'll go I'll lean slightly to the over on this one for Indiana, but no major edge for me. The big tiebreaker again being the coaching here.
Did the Ants make it or were they soft?
So I'm actually going to have to dash out again because it's actually I got the notification. I grabbed the box, wrong box. I think they put the Ants in the mailbox, which is black and like cast iron. So like it's going to be really, really hot and baking in there. So when we hit break, whenever they tell you about the South Park and the Wegovy weight loss South Park episode or whatever we have today to promo, I'm going to be dashing out there.
How many games are going to win this fall?
Baked ants are actually they're very healthy.
They got a lot of protein.
They're a delicious snack.
I mean, I just can't believe in the season when the battle against ants is one of the premier pest battles you're fighting on the home front, you're going to willingly invite ants into your house.
We didn't have a whole lot of ants make it the first time. It's kind of, you guys ever played Oregon Trail?
Yes.
Yes.
It's like you get the options like, oh, let's ford the river. Most of these ants did not make it.
Okay. The Iowa Hawkeyes at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, have an over-under win total of 8.5, juiced heavily to the under right now. Over at plus 152, under at minus 188. Tom, we've been discussing the Iowa offense, the Iowa quarterbacks, sort of our expectation for the way that this team is going to look. What are you going to end up doing now that we've got the schedule in front of us and the season knocking on the door?
I genuinely have Iowa projected for 8.5 wins. So this is like this is very much a coin flippy situation for me. But it's Iowa, and I figure they're going to Iowa their way to some Iowa stuff. So I'm going over, but it is not with the highest of confidence. I mean, they're gonna win the Illinois State game. They should beat Troy. That Iowa State game, like they have dominated that rivalry for years. So I tend to give the Hawkeyes the benefit of the doubt there, but that's a game that they can lose. First conference game is at Minnesota. I'm not super high on the Gophers this year, so I think they should win that game. But then you get the bye, you get at Ohio State. I think we know how that's going to go. Washington at home, fine. At Michigan State, should win. Northwestern at home, Wisconsin at home, at UCLA, at Maryland, Nebraska. Like, you look at the schedule, and this is a team that needs to win 9 games, at least. But my concern, as always, is going to be the quarterback situation. Like, Cade McNamara, from what I've been reading, has kind of, like, he had a terrible weekend last weekend, but he's begun to separate himself a little bit from Brendan Sullivan in the offense. And I think it looks like he's definitely going to be the starter for the opener. The offensive line will be fine. I don't know what they have at receiver. I think they've got decent running backs, and the defense should be good. And the secondary will probably have some guys who get like 9 interceptions. So, like, they're going to Iowa. I'm going to guess 9-3, but again, I really have no confidence in the over here.
Totally agree. I have bet some Iowa stuff. I took some Iowa 16-1 to make the Big Ten championship game. I bet them at 14. I think it's knocked down to like 7 now or something, or maybe 10. Or I don't think that's as good of a value, obviously. There's certainly a chance in which Iowa does what Iowa does, but that's somewhat dependent on a lot of the teams on the schedule being very bad, which they could be.
Mm-hmm.
But, if Iowa State is slightly better than we think, or, if Wisconsin, maybe Van Dyke is actually good and returns somewhat to form, then that's a losable game. But I do see a lot of quarterbacks on this schedule that defense should just be able to swallow up. And Iowa knows how to play Iowa style, and they're better at it than everybody else is. So at this number, I am showing no edge, but slightly under. So I'll go under.
Slightly under at -188, not rushing to bet it. My range of outcomes is if everything goes horribly wrong, they're 5-7. If everything goes right, they're 11-1. Like that's kind of the range that I'm looking at right here. So very, very slightly to the under. Again, we've got some of those mystery teams. Wisconsin, throw them throw them in the conversation as well, where Wisconsin is at the game's at home. You want to give it to them, but it's an Iowa-Wisconsin game. You can't call that a certified win. Can't call it a certified loss. Iowa State. It's a Cyhawk game. It's El Assico. Can't call it a certified win. Can't call it a certified loss. There's just so many games that have a really small margin for error. So very, very slightly to the under. Not something I'm looking to bet. Again, if everything goes right, they might only lose to Ohio State. They can win every other game on that schedule. If everything goes wrong, it's probably something like 5-7. I don't think that'll happen because it's Kirk Ferentz and it's Iowa, and they ain't missing a bowl game. They've got a floor, but like that's just kind of where I see in terms of Iowa and the separation with some of these teams on the schedule. So give me the ever so slightest of unders, not something I'm looking to bet at this price. All right, but do you need to go get the ants? Should we should we hit the break so you can go get the ants and then do
the break? Let's save these ants.
Okay.
I'll open them on air.
Ooh, coming up after the break.
The package, not the two.
Coming up on the other side, Win Totals rolls on with Maryland, Michigan, and ants.
College football is back. SMU at Nevada on CBS Sports Network.
Back here on the Cover 3 podcast. For those of you watching along on youtube.com/cover3, you saw the promo for Saturday night's nightcap, which will be on CBS Sports Network, SMU and Nevada. Let's see who we got on the game. I think that we've got
Amanda's working sideline.
I was going to say, I think we've got Amanda Guerra, the GOAT, on working sideline for that game on CBS Sports Network. So make sure you check it out.
She's having a really exciting conversation with Amanda and Jenny Dell the other day about what they were going to wear on the sidelines for their first games because they were worried about the color schemes. I was giving them the best advice I could.
What'd you say? Go as loud as possible?
Jenny was worried about wearing white for the Akron Ohio State game because Akron will likely be wearing white, but I think white's a neutral color. You're fine. As long as you're not wearing blue and gold, nobody will care.
I agree. And then what was Amanda's worry?
She's not really. She's just saying she can't wear red and blue because of SMU.
Right. Well, I mean, as with her own, Dallas and Texas history. Mm-hmm. I mean, she knows how not to run afoul of the ponies.
No, you don't want to.
Yeah, Rich Waltz, Robert Turbin, and Amanda Guerra on the call for CBS Sports Network. Around that time, we'll set an official time and follow us on Twitter at Cover3 Podcast. We will be having our reaction to the first day. Probably won't go super long. Only got 3 daggum games. If something crazy happens in the CBS Sports Network game of the day, then of course we'll be able to react to it live. So somewhere during that game, it's not going to be like a full watch along, but we'll be doing our recap to all things from Ireland with Florida State and Georgia Tech, Broncos debut at New Mexico as they take on Montana State. And then of course the ACC debut for those are ants.
Are they alive? I see movement.
Yeah, I see some movement.
I don't know if they're like gassed inside of there or what.
Are they gonna come to life once you introduce oxygen to the equation?
That's my wonder. Yeah.
Jon Snow.
we told the boys that they're just kind of like sleeping and hibernating like bears do, and then I was hoping to just swap out some live ants so they woke up. So,
Hold on, you haven't told them about the other ants? That
they're just
ant hill in the sky.
They're just real hibernating and lazy. Just yeah.
No, those ants went to your uncle's farm.
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical on this.
All right, listen, there's an ant hill out in my yard. I will just go collect some ants for you.
So I guess the kind that are good and live in an ant farm, they're harvester ants. I don't know how to tell if Tom's ants are harvester ants. Our ants are like fire ants in Florida, so I don't really want to bring those in the house.
I've been like just trying to clean every counter just to make sure to keep those boys at bay. You're introducing them into
The other day, the
environment.
2-year-old walks in and he's eating bacon. I'm like, what you eat? He's like, I'm eating bacon. Ask my wife, did you make bacon? She's like, no. Like, when's the last time we made bacon? She's like, it's been like a week. So I think he's like hid
Stashed
bacon
it?
in his little, in his little, like, stashed it in his little like workshop out on the patio. And
So he's eating some.
Got
ants.
walking around bacon. What's
it's
wrong with
important to
that?
build good gut health at an early age, right? Got to have those like, microbes and all that stuff. I'm sure there's some probiotics going on with that bacon.
It's important for a young boy to have walking around meat just to chew on every once in a while.
The Maryland Terrapins have an over-under win total at FanDuel Sportsbook where you can make every moment more of 6.5 wins, over plus 116, under minus 142. Maryland at one time was the newcomer, the shiny new thing, and now they're just Maryland.
They're just there.
They're just Maryland. So let's, our feet to the fire, or maybe you've got some vindication behind it. Tom, what are we doing with Maryland?
I've taken nothing but overs so far because CBS is the home of the Big Ten. So now I got to inflate everybody's win total for the season. But this is my first under. I think Maryland's going to a bowl game. I just don't know that they're going to get to 7-5. We've had plenty of opinions on Talia on this show over the years, and I think that a lot of it was just because we were so used to him that you get kind of tired of him. But I do think replacing him will be a far bigger deal than a lot of Maryland fans are assuming. I know MJ Morris came in from NC State, but based on what I saw of MJ Morris at North Carolina State, I am not completely sold on him just yet. I think the potential is there, but I'm not ready to just give it to him. So when I look at that going into the season, I look at the rest of their roster, I think they're going to be fine at receiver. I have questions about their offensive line. I kind of need to see it. Defensively, they had flashes last year, and then they had also times where they looked awful. So I don't know what we're going to get this season, but non-con, UConn, at Virginia, Villanova should win 2 of those at a minimum, right? But in conference, you're getting USC. You've got to go to Oregon. You get Iowa. You have to go to Penn State. So, you're not playing Michigan or Ohio State. And, thank God for that if you're a Maryland fan. You don't have to play those 2. But you still have a pretty tough draw. You get Iowa at home. We know what Iowa did to them the last time they came to College Park. Rutgers at home. I think you're happy that you get that game at Maryland because Rutgers is a team that you kind of need to beat to reach your goals. But going on the road to Minnesota should be tough for you. Going on the road to Indiana this year is probably going to be tougher than you expected. So I think this is a 6-6 team. I'm going to go under.
Tom stole all my analysis. Yeah, I think they probably go 6-6, but I have 5-7 as enough more likely than 7-5 that I'm going to go under here. Without a lot of hesitation. I don't know that MJ Morris wins this job.
I know.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's kind of a wild.
So Billy Edwards, Cameron Edge, who are we looking at?
It'd be Billy Edwards.
It'd be Billy Edwards.
MJ Morris has not been able to create separation from Billy Edwards. And if Billy Edwards is the starting quarterback, what does that mean for the fact that you have good wide receivers like Ty Felton and Caden Prather? Can you be able to take advantage of that if Billy Edwards is your quarterback? That's the challenge.
Yeah. For me to go over, I would need to price Maryland as a top 32, top 31 type team, and I just don't have that. So I'm going to go under here with the Terps. I do think that Brian Williams does a really good job with his defense, by the way. They are consistently better than I think they're going to be, and I still like the front 7 a lot. The defense lost a lot in the back end. Who could take advantage of that in their schedule? USC, Oregon, Penn State. The other thing I like for Maryland to make a bowl is that they're 2 really hard games that they would lose wherever they play. They're on the road.
Yep.
At Penn State, at Oregon, cool. Get those losses out of the way. Give me more games at home that I have a chance to win. But I'm still slightly under at this price.
No. This isn't over. This is a quintessential Maryland football season. This is Maryland starts 5-1 or 6-0.
Oh,
and
right.
Yeah, and even pops up in the top 25 or something. They just start stacking these wins. No, Michigan State, you get them at home early in the season. Would probably rather have that then on the road later in the season. Indiana, another first-year coach. You get them in the first month of the season. Northwestern, game at home. Maryland seems like a team that they're going to be able to stack enough in the bank early that they just got to win one game in the back half of the season to be able to get us there. And look, it's going to be a sweat. I'm not throwing like a ton of confidence behind this, but I've got Maryland as a 7-5 team. And I think that they can do it thanks to the way that schedule shakes out, where you just stack so many wins early that you just hope you fall backwards into something against Rutgers or Iowa to be able to take you over the top. Bud, you look like you're about to say something.
Can they get lucky again with the offensive line portaling? Last year they did.
Right.
They had to replace it a bunch.
It's quarterback and offensive line for me. I think their defense is going to be good.
Yeah, I agree.
Quarterback and offensive line are going to be the big questions. If you can get those to click, then I think this won't be as much of a sweat. Again, I'm looking at Minnesota, Rutgers. Like I'm looking at opportunities where they should be able to get the seventh win a little bit later, but we'll see.
I'm really happy Michael's back in the chat, by the way.
What?
I'm happy Michael's back in the chat. I was worried about him.
You mean like when they yell at us for not talking about Notre Dame, then when we did talk about Notre Dame, they're mad at us for not talking enough about Notre Dame? Is that what's happening?
He's been
or we
training
didn't say
all
they were
season.
going 12-0.
He's in prime form. This is good.
It's great.
We dared suggest Notre Dame might lose a game.
The Michigan Wolverines, the reigning champions, have an over-under win total at what? FanDuel Sportsbook has this at 8.5, minus 162. If you do want to go over, and if you think this is an 8-4 year for Sharon Moore, well, look, they've got a plus 132 for you. So, Tom, we talk about Michigan all the time. I mean, it's just kind of where we're at right now with them as a program. So now it's win total time. It's time to put some W's and L's on the schedule. Where are we going with 8.5 for the reigning champs?
I mean, I think you have to go under because now that Connor Stallions is gone, can Michigan even win a game? Like, I don't know. That's the only reason they ever won last year was because they knew everybody's signs. I think that let's see, it's at 8.5 over. I look at the schedule. The Texas game is a possible loss. Mm-hmm. Oregon game is a possible loss. At Ohio State is a possible loss. Other than that, I believe even with all the question marks we have about this team, I mean, we know defensively they will be phenomenal. There are still questions at quarterback. There are going to be questions at offensive line. There are going to be questions at wide receiver. But the rest of the schedule, Fresno State, Arkansas State, USC, Minnesota, at Washington, at Illinois, Michigan State, at Indiana, Northwestern. Can any of those teams block anybody on this defense? Do we know for sure? Like, I'm very high on Illinois' offensive line, but even then, I still don't know if they can deal with the Michigan defensive line. So, as I've said a few times this offseason, the offense might not be that good, but I'm not really that concerned because Michigan might only need to score 17 to 20 points per game to win most of these games. It's going to be when they come up against the other kind of national title conference contenders where I think it's going to become a problem. So I think 9-3 is very much in play, and I actually have 10-2 is more likely than 8-4. So I'm going over.
I'm over as well. Tom and I are agreeing on like all these today, which is a little scary, but for one of us, or well, for both of us or none of us, I guess. What you said about who can block them is so key. I think that they can just pick the quarterback who's like the lowest variance potentially, which to me is probably Orji because of Orji's legs. I don't think that the defensive coaching changes are going to matter that much to get to 9 wins. Now for 12, certainly, I think they downgraded the defensive, with the defensive coaching staff, but that front 7 to me is so nasty that I just don't think most of these teams can hang. Like Fresno can't block them. Arkansas State can't block them. I don't think USC can block them, to be honest. Minnesota maybe can block them, but not well enough, I don't think, to win the game. Washington definitely can't. Illinois, Tom saying Illinois like the receiver surprised me a little bit, and that one definitely there's some chance, but can Illinois stop them enough with the run game stuff? I don't know. Michigan State, no. Oregon can block them. Indiana can't. Northwestern can't. Ohio State can, I think. I think they go 9-3. I think there's like 3 high-level offenses that can block them. And I think they lose those 3 games.
Yeah, I think they go 10-2. Give me throw the 9.5 back on the board, and I'm still over. I do not think that they will go 12-0, but I do not think that they are incapable of beating every single team on their schedule. They are not overwhelming enough for me to make that kind of call, but I still think that they can split Texas, USC, Oregon, Ohio State. I think they can go 2-2 across those games. And yes, it is a massive advantage that Texas, USC, and Oregon are all coming to the big house.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm encouraged by the buzz and the indication that we've had in terms of some of those huge offensive question marks, offensive line, quarterback, and otherwise. I still remain curious about just what the offense is going to look like, and when it is 3rd and long, what are the go-to plays? Who are the go-to players that end up stepping up for those kinds of situations? But to echo what y'all have said, I just think that there's going to be such a massive advantage against 8 opponents on the schedule that they are going to be able to punt from plus territory and not take risks and say, all right, drive 85 yards because we don't think you can do it. And that can set up for a double-digit win season. So yeah, give me 10-2, and I will go over 8.5, and I would even take it over at 9.5.
Yeah, and you have to factor in, like, they only have 4 road games. Like, because one of the quirks of the Big Ten's 9-game conference schedule is you alternate years where it's like 1 year you play 4 home games and you play 5 home games in conference. This is one of the years where they're playing the 5 home games, and then all their non-con games are at home because Texas agreed to play them in Ann Arbor. So, like, if there's a good time to go through all these changes, it's the year when 8 of your games are at home.
How many games are going to win this fall? Year 1 for Jonathan Smith at Michigan State, and the over-under win total at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, is at 4.5. Now, over -144, under +126 suggests that it could be flirting with 5 and 7 in the eyes of the odds makers. But Bud, do you agree? What are we doing with Sparty?
So this was a pretty good bet under at 5.5, I thought, but it's been bet down so much. I'm like no edge, but very slightly over here. If I have to pick, I'm really excited to watch Aiden Childs. I think 4.5 juice over is roughly a good number. I think Jonathan Smith is an excellent coach, and this team lost so much, but at the same time, I'm not convinced that it's actually worse than some of these teams that just never had any talent to start with. So you get me. If I told you that Childs, relative to the talent around him, was the best quarterback in the Big Ten this year, that's kind of out there, but it's not like one where like I would bet my house that he's not, right? Like it's possible. And part of that is his ability, and part of that is the lack of quarterback play in this league. So I'm going to go over here very slightly. I think 5 and 7 is a little more likely than 4 and 8.
I am also taking the over here. I agree with you. I think that Aiden Childs could be the best quarterback in the Big Ten by the time the season is over. I also think that while there are questions, like I mentioned earlier with Illinois, in a league like this, and this goes along with the Childs point, where there's so much question marks after those top 4 teams, like having a decent offense could go a very long way against a lot of the teams that are going to be on your schedule. And I think with Childs and Jonathan Smith and the coaching staff that they brought in, improved what I'm expecting to be very much improved play on the offensive line, this is a team that could be capable of putting up more points than a lot of the teams it's facing as the year goes on. I think the defense has been a huge problem for them in the last few years, but in comes Joe Rossi, who we saw at Minnesota did a very good job of putting together defenses that had some NFL talent, particularly in the back end and the secondary, but weren't stocked with NFL players from top to bottom. So, I mean, I think long-term you want to buy more Michigan State than anything, but I also think in the short term, this is a team that could surprise. And by surprise, I only need 5 wins to hit this over. So, yeah, give it to me.
Bud and Tom are 2 of the smartest college football minds that I know. and they have agreed on a lot today. And I've been on the other side of both of them and remain in that position. Boys, if nothing else, we give you a diversity of opinions here on the Cover 3 podcast. It's not a strong under, but it is an under from me. I just like Indiana, Illinois. I think those are going to be really tough games for a Michigan State team that's just in like you said, Tom, you can love the coaching staff. You can love the young quarterback and think about what this can be. And when you have those kind of teams, anecdotally, like the win total doesn't always match the excitement. You know, we think about like an early Kansas or an early Arizona when you can see it, but yet you go back and you look at the actual results and it didn't always, come up on the right side of things. I think that it's, I think Ohio State, Oregon, Iowa, Michigan. I give that game to Rutgers. I think that the Maryland game, I'm giving that one to the Terps as well. I see a lot of losses. I've got this thing at 4-8. It is not a huge run to the window. I'm going to go and bet it, but as I'm, trying to balance this all out across the rest of the Big Ten, I'm going to go under on Sparty. How many games are going to win this fall? On to the Minnesota Golden Gophers, where at FanDuel Sportsbook, you can get a over-under win total of 5.5, over -102, under -120. Tom, are we rowing the boat or is the boat springing leaks? We gave all this credit to Joe Rossi. Now Joe Rossi's gone.
Yeah, we've come upon some rocks and some shallow water. I'm going under. I think that there's already like injuries. We've seen Darius Taylor, who I think was huge for them last season towards the end of the year. He's a little banged up right now, so there's some question marks there. And just besides that, though, like overall, the vibes I've been getting, I'm going to the chip side here, have not been super positive from a lot of what I've heard about Minnesota this fall and even into last spring. And I look at the schedule and it's like North Carolina at home. Yeah, they're wearing that soft ass blue, but I still think that that's a tough way to start your season. It's a big game. They should crush Rhode Island. They should beat a Nevada team I don't have very high hopes for. But like then you get to the Big Ten conference play and you're starting off with Iowa at Michigan and USC. That's like a tough beginning. You could be sitting there staring 0-3 in the league in the face. And who knows what that does to you mentally as far as the rest of the season. Then you head on the road for the Rose Bowl to play UCLA. And then it's not until late October do you get your first bye. So you've already played 7 games and you could be off to a pretty tough start. It's the second half of the schedule where things ease up a bit, where you get Maryland at Illinois, at Rutgers, Penn State, and then you finish obviously with your rivalry game at Wisconsin. But I don't know what kind of condition this team's going to be in. I don't know what to expect of Max Brosmer, who I will go out on a limb and say I believe he is an upgrade on what they had at quarterback last year. But how much of an upgrade will he be? I don't know. You mentioned Rossi leaving. What happens to this defense without him? Can they maintain that same level? I'm just skeptical. Like, I don't think Minnesota is going to be awful, but I do think they're going to miss a bowl game. So I'm going under.
I'm going over.
Finally, we disagree.
Finally, geez. The way I look at this is it's one of the better offensive lines in the Big Ten, I think. I definitely think they upgraded at quarterback, even though I don't know if Max Brosmer is like that good. I think he's just functional where Calic Manis was not for them last year. I am concerned that Rossi decided to leave this place to go to a clear rebuild with Michigan State. Like that, maybe you should read into that move because that kind of makes sense to do. Defensive line's probably improved. Definitely has some secondary questions for this team. The way I kind of map it out is you get 2 auto wins, Rhode Island and Nevada. Okay. You get 2 basically like we can't really score with these teams, losses most likely with Michigan and Penn State. Then you get like 7 toss-ups, basically, which is every game that is not Wisconsin. And then Wisconsin is one of those you probably lose, but it's certainly not like a lock. You'll be, 6.5, maybe 7 at Wisconsin, I would
and
think.
it's for an X.
Right.
There's
exactly.
an X on the line. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, so you figure like 2 autos, you split the 7 tosses, that gets you to 5.5 right there. I am slightly over on this. I think you're kind of crazy if you bet this over, though, for
Oh,
this reason. What are the odds that this team goes over if they do not beat North Carolina in the opener?
right.
I could just bet Minnesota in the opener, lay 2, either get my money back right now so I can bet it again and turn my bankroll, or lose and know it's gone right there. If they lose to North Carolina, basically marking it as a loss in my sheet anyway. It's I don't know, unless you're having like so much liquidity that you need to find every single possible place to get down at, I would rather just bet North Carolina. Or sorry, I'd rather bet Minnesota over North Carolina. And conversely, I probably don't want to bet the under either. I'd rather just bet North Carolina to upset them. Like literally, you start the season with the toss-up. That logic's not perfect. They still have 6 other toss-ups. It's not crazy they could go,
Right.
4-2 in the other 6 and get it. But for me, I think I'd rather just bet Minnesota week 1 if I feel like they're going to win the game.
And you know where some of those toss-ups are? On the road.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm on the under here, and I've got this one as like maybe even a 4-8 could be in the cards. The like Hugh again. We'll get to the Bruins tomorrow, but Minnesota going to UCLA. You could tell me UCLA wins that football game. I think if they play, in Minneapolis, then probably not. But you factor in everything involved, that could get really, really tricky. They have to go to Illinois. They have to go to Rutgers. I think North Carolina is going to win that football game. I'm not going to give them a loss, or I'm not going to give them a win. I'm going to consider it a toss-up for the purposes of breaking down all these win totals. But I think that they are going to find themselves where like 7.5 might be a best case scenario. And I am stunned, Bud, that you didn't mention the name Darius Taylor. That's like one of your favorite running backs in the country. This was your opportunity to talk about Minnesota. You're on the over, and we didn't even talk about Darius Taylor.
Why would I talk about Darius Taylor when we have our fantasy draft tonight?
Because you already called him the Alvin Kamara of the Big Ten.
Christ. He is good. Also, Daniel Jackson's been banged up. They're stud receiver, so I'm a little bummed about that.
Yeah. We're checking the
Wait,
water.
did I really call him the Alvin Kamara of the Big Ten?
No, I think Aaron Taylor did.
Yeah,
I was like, Jesus. Okay. Yeah. Like I was high at him.
Count him out. Here we go, baby. It's Nebraska, aka Matt Rule year 2, aka Lil Mahomes, Dylan Raiola. He wears 15 and everything. Now, can he put it all together? Right here, first year of college football. Now, the win total for the Cornhuskers over at FanDuel Sportsbook is 7.5. You mentioned some of the left tackle, linebacker. We've had some injuries that have started to pile up. I wanted to save it for this part, but don't we put a little bit of added confidence when we're adjusting to defensive injuries because of the leadership and history of Tony White and just sort of the way how sound that group has been year in and year out? And I expect, correct me if I'm wrong, they will be a very, very good defense again. Is there any reason to think otherwise?
No, they will face more competent passing attacks this year than they did last year. So we'll have to see how the secondary holds up. I am no edge at this price, clearly.
Same.
So there are a couple prices out there in the market where I show a kind of bettable edge to the under, but not at plus 100. So flip a coin. What we got here? Let's see. We'll spin an ant tube. All right. I'm over. Whatever.
Maybe did that wake the ants up?
It did not. No. Nor did the ring light. I'm not really sure what they're doing. So with Nebraska, I think they will be able to run the football well. I have some concern for them when they play some of the better passing teams, and there is some uncertainty on this schedule about how good some of these passing teams will be. For instance, how good is Colorado? I think their receivers are pretty awesome. Can they pass protect? That I don't know about. Can Purdue, is at Purdue no longer a dangerous game for the Cornhuskers? That's kind of what this gets down to. Are they past losing to Purdue on the road? Because Purdue can throw it around a little bit, right? Is at Indiana a team and a game they could lose because Indiana can chuck it around with Rourke. UCLA probably can throw it around pretty good this year, I think, based on who they have at receiver and the quarterback. What about Wisconsin? Like USC, we know can throw. So there are more dangerous passing games on this Nebraska schedule than they had last year by a lot. So I am slightly under, but I spun the ant too, so I'm going over because I don't really show an edge. Like, this is a good number. It's been hammered into place for like 15 weeks now.
Dylan Raiola worshiping Patrick Mahomes makes sense for Nebraska because Patrick Mahomes is the past, Caleb Williams is the future. So for Nebraska, that just plays. But I'm also on the under here because I think Nebraska is going to be better this year. I do think they're going to get to a bowl game this season, which is a step forward for them compared to how things have gone in recent years. But I kind of want to pump the brakes a little bit in that I just don't know if this team is going to win 8 games. It seems like you're asking a lot of a program that struggled to win 6 to just jump up to 8, especially when the league as a total is getting more difficult because you've added 4 more schools to it. So I'm pumping the brakes a little bit and just kind of betting on the lower end of the projection, which I think has been a safer bet with Nebraska in recent years. But I'm also with you, bud. It's like I don't see an edge on either side of this one actually betting it. I think 7-5 is more likely than 8-4, but it's not like it's a huge gap, nor is there, I think, a huge gap between 7-5 and 6-6. So under.
Colorado could be a game that you play that, like, Colorado might decide it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to play the, I've got no edge, kind of could see it going this way, could see it going that way. That's the game where if Nebraska wins it, this thing could finish 8-4. I mean, the Rutgers game is in Lincoln. The UCLA game is in Lincoln. The Wisconsin game is in Lincoln. I'm like you. I am right on 7.5, forced to go one way or the other. I would lean over, but to me, the Colorado game probably decides it. So if Shedeur goes in there and throws for 345 yards and 4 touchdowns and Colorado wins because Nebraska wasn't able to hold things together on the back end of the defense, then that's just one game, but it probably ends up deciding the win total, at least the way that, this thing is breaking down. So I'm going to give Nebraska, UTEP, Northern Iowa, Illinois. I will give Nebraska the game at Purdue. And I will give Nebraska the game at Indiana. With a lot of those other toss-ups on the schedule, I'm sort of hammered in there. So you said that this number hasn't moved. It's just been sitting at 7.5 for a couple months. Yes?
I don't know what it opened at, actually.
I think it's been 7.5 the whole time, but I'm not 100% on that.
Interesting. All right, Nebraska. We got everybody's locked in. Choose your flavor there. Maybe just bet the Colorado game, whether you're leaning over or under. How many games are going to win this fall? I'm not going to do it right now. But, I mean, we could just start singing Ants Marching by Dave Matthews Band. Isn't that the one that starts with the ba, 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 ba?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She wakes up in the morning.
Shakes her ants to see if they're still living.
All right, the Northwestern Wildcats, year 2, David Braun, over under win total at FanDuel Sportsbook of 4.5. They were a bowl team last year. 4.5 over -122, under +100. Tom, I don't want to take your analysis, but I have not been able to break down Northwestern without your comments about the broken bone theory and trying to readjust here.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a believer in the broken bone theory here for Northwestern.
Good to hear. Good to hear. I will say I know this line moved because it used to be at 5.5. And now it is down to 4.5, and I am still on the under because, as I mentioned, the line you're talking about, like it was last year, shortly, not just a little over a year ago, Pat Fitzgerald gets fired. David Braun steps in as the head coach simply because he's the only coach on the staff that had no prior experience in Evanston to what had been going on that led to Pat Fitzgerald being fired. And I compared it to like if you break your leg, there's like an adrenaline rush that kind of helps you overcome the pain before it really settles in on you. And I think last season was that adrenaline rush for Northwestern, in that they really exceeded expectations because nobody expected anything from them. And they were also playing in a pretty soft schedule in a softer division, and they took advantage of it. This year, I don't know what to expect from the quarterback situation. I think Cam Porter is a perfectly fine running back. I don't think Cam Porter is a particularly special running back. I'm not that high on the offensive line. I am not that high on the receiver core. Defensively, it's like a workman kind of defense. I don't think there's any truly exceptional talents on that side of the ball. And then when you get to the schedule, like, I have no idea. Like, it's hard to say based on previous years that Northwestern ever had a tremendous home field advantage. But the fact that they are literally playing in their practice stadium alongside Lake Michigan, I really don't know how that's going to impact them. I don't know how it's going to impact everybody. It's just a weird situation. You will play a lot of your conference home games at Wrigley Field, but even that, like, you get Ohio State at Wrigley Field. Do you think there's going to be more Northwestern fans in that stadium than Ohio State? Probably not. You get Illinois at Wrigley. The last time these two teams played there were more Illini fans in the stands than there were Northwestern. So I don't know what kind of home field advantage this team is going to have throughout the season. And like, at Washington, tough. At Maryland, tough. At Iowa, tough. At Purdue, winnable, but tougher. At Michigan, no prayer. It's just, I look at this team and I don't really see a reliable path to 5 wins. And I felt the same way last year and they did it. So it doesn't mean it can't happen. It's just logically, I think this team takes a step back. Also, they won 8 games last year. 6 were 1-score games. Like, that's a lot of coin flips to win. And they also had a plus 13 turnover differential, was the 3rd best in the league. Unless you are a team with a whole hell of a lot of talent, it is hard to rely on winning the turnover battle that well every single season. So if things come back the other direction, it could get pretty damn ugly.
I agree. I'm under here. Obviously got bet down a full win. So like, that's not quite the edge that it once was. They could lose to Miami, Ohio.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, they're 4-point favorites. Now, I'm assuming that most people are going to use like 0 or 0.5.
This was me looking for Brett Gabbert injury updates right as we're getting ready to talk about this, because I was just about to say that same thing.
I mean, it's probably what, like, I don't know what you're using for home field for Northwestern this year, but it's probably like a 1 or a 0.5. Mm-hmm. It ain't much. It's probably like Sunbelt-ish, where you basically use 0. Duke, I do think that they can beat Duke, but Duke could also beat them.
Right.
Eastern Illinois, I think, is pretty bad by FCS standards, actually. So I don't think they're going to beat Washington. If it was in Chicago, I think maybe they could, but on the road, that's one that Washington probably knows they have to get. Indiana at home, I think there's like small dogs. At Maryland, does it say something that Sullivan left for Iowa? But at the same time, like, maybe they went and got Mike Wright because Mike Wright is a runner, and they're going to be playing in the stadium with crazy wind for a lot of these games this year. So maybe throwing the ball, given their personnel, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I mean,
that could be the home field advantage. The kicker will know to aim 10 yards right of the upright.
This is a really hard job, man. Broken bone theory is pretty damn good, actually.
Thank you.
I'm under as well.
Yep. I am under as well. I do not see, as Bud just laid out for you, I mean, I see like an 0-9 in conference play could happen. I could see a rough season for the Northwestern Wildcats. So 4.5. No, thank you. I've got this one as an under. All right. That means since we got through the ends, we'll begin Wednesday's show with the O's. Oh, looky there. Ohio State, Oregon. Then on to Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, UCLA, USC, Washington, and Wisconsin. That will be the order for Wednesday's rest of the Big Ten win totals. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Shout out to my nephew Jake, who played his first game at left tackle yesterday and pancaked a kid into the dirt.